The Atlanta Braves are reportedly interested in free agent starter Walker Buehler. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? I'll tell you next. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Monday, November 18th. Your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on Twitter at Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and Instagram as well. You can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. This is both a podcast and a newsletter. And it's been assumed that the Braves need to add 2 starters this offseason. In the second segment, I'm going to break down exactly why that is and who some of those players might be, depending on how you want to structure the 2 guys. I've made some lists like we like to do on this show. But first, I want to talk about Jon Heyman's report from Friday that the Atlanta Braves are amongst the clubs showing early interest in free agent right-hander, former Los Angeles Dodgers starter Walker Buehler. We don't normally get reports like this because the Atlanta Braves front office absolutely does not leak. It is the tightest ship in all of baseball. If I had to make it through a flood, I'm using the Braves front office to do it. But it's entirely likely that Jon Heyman got this from the agent side, not from the front office side. And we're going to treat it as if it's true, because we have no reason as of now to believe it is not. Interestingly, Walker Buehler's agents are Excel Sports Management, who was running the Freddie Freeman free agency, and then he fired them after signing his Dodgers deal. And AJ Minter, who was with them, swapped in October from Excel over to the Bledsoe agency. So find it really interesting. Dansby Swanson obviously stuck with Excel. He left. Jason Hayward sticks with Excel. But AJ Minter left. Freddie Freeman fired them. Interesting. Just wanted to throw that. No idea if that's good or bad for the Braves. Just wanted to throw that out there. But I understand the appeal of Walker Buehler, right? Walker Buehler is probably the only pitcher that is not going to require a long-term deal that can give you the upside of a number one, an ace-type pitcher, okay? And it's important, I think, to talk about who Walker Buehler is and why he can give you that upside. And if you just really paid attention this year, I think you really missed exactly how good Walker Buehler is as a pitcher. From 2018 through 2021, he got 8 games of relief in 2017 when he debuted, like 9 innings. He became a starter in 2018, started all but 1 game that year, and then from that point was nothing but a starter all the way until he suffered the injury in 2022. From 2018 to 2021, Walker Buehler went 39-13. It's a .750 winning percentage, and with a 2.82 ERA. He threw 2 complete games, 620 strikeouts in 564 innings. He has about 4.5 strikeouts for every walk. It was a 9.9 strikeouts per 9 innings and a 2.2 walk per 9 innings. And then it's funny, across those 4 seasons, he had 1 Charlie Morton worth of hit by pitches. He had 20 hit by pitches in 4 years, which is one season for Charlie Morton, right? Now, 2022, he made 12 starts, was a little behind, ERA of 4. He got injured, needed Tommy John surgery, missed all of 2023, was trying to come back, but a hip injury during his rehab slowed him down, and came back in 2024. Completely different in 2024, right? 1-6, 5.38 ERA in 16 starts. Struck out 64 with 28 walks and 75 1/3 innings. So during those 4 years, Again, he was one of the best pitchers in baseball. 2.82 ERA in that 4-year span. He averaged 24 starts with a 10-3 record and 141 innings. And that includes the 2020 year where it's a small sample size for everybody. He made 8 starts. But outside of that, 24, 30, and 33, which led baseball in 2021, was twice an All-Star, was twice a Cy Young finisher. It's a 9th place finisher in 2019 and a 4th place finisher in 2021. Before the injury, by all respects, Walker Buehler was an ace, like one of the best pitchers in baseball. Again, his 2024, he absolutely struggled, right? 18.6% strikeout rate, 8.1% walk rate. And it's interesting, the strikeout rate, MLB average is 22.6%. His personal average was like 26, and he got as high as 29.2% in his prime. So below average. His walk rate of 8.1 was the highest of a full season of his career. MLB average is only 8.5%. So his walks went up significantly, but still ended up below average for MLB pitching. Now, that doesn't separate starters and relievers and all. That's just legitimately just pitching, right? Pros and cons here to Walker Buehler, and I made a list going through some of this. Con for Walker Buehler, I think the biggest con right here is in the regular season, he looked absolutely cooked, okay? We talked about the ERA, the 5.38 ERA. He didn't dramatically overperform his ERA. His fielded independent pitching was 5.54. Now, his expected ERA was a little better, 4.78, but that's still not good. And of his stuff, none of his pitches, you look at on StatCast in the buckets, fastball, breaking ball, off speed, everything had a negative run value, right? Fastball, -7. Breaking ball, -6. Off speed pitches, -5. And when you break down, he threw 7 pitches this year. Now, some of them weren't used a lot. He threw 17 sliders, right? He threw 69 changeups. It's a nice amount of changeup usage, right? 5%. He was mostly four-seamer, cutter, curve, sinker. Had a sweeper he used a little bit in there and things like that. But this is something where nothing really worked that well for Walker Buehler, okay? The fastball in particular really got rocked, okay? He threw 388 of them, so 29% usage. He averaged 95 on it. The velocity was remarkably close to where he's been, right? His fastball wasn't that much softer than it was in 22 before the injury. I think maybe even in 21. I haven't expanded the full thing. He was throwing around 95 with his stuff back in the day. He's throwing around 95 now. So the velocity's there. But the actual performance, 342 batting average, 696 slugging on the four-seamer. Okay? So Walker Buehler's stuff, his regular season, didn't necessarily look great. Okay? The flip side of this, his postseason was actually pretty good. Okay? Walker Buehler has a bad start against the Padres in the NLDS. He goes 5 innings, 6 runs allowed on 7 hits, 1 walk, it was intentional, to no strikeouts. From that point on, after that, he pitched 10 scoreless innings. He put up 4 scoreless innings with 3 hits allowed, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts against the Mets in a Dodgers win. And then he put up 5 innings against the Yankees, which I believe it was 2 hits, 2 walks, and what was it? Was it 5 strikeouts? And then he turns around and he pitches, I think it was like 1 game later, or 2 games later, he turns around and he closes out that final game of the World Series and he gets the save to clinch for the Dodgers. So he's been, no walks, 2 strikeouts in that final inning. There you go. So he finished the postseason with 5 walks to 13 strikeouts. But after that first outing, in the 10 scoreless innings, it was 13 strikeouts to 4 walks, and none of them came in that inning of relief. There you go. as bad as Walker Buehler looked in the regular season, and there wasn't a ton of, like, his regular season wasn't awful, mind you. Like, he had games where it would be he had some quality starts. He pitched against Atlanta in mid-September. He allowed 2 runs, 1 earned, 3 hits in 6 innings. Struck out 5. He also walked 5, right? He had a game against Colorado. You would expect him to do well. He struck out 9 with only 1 walk, but he also allowed 4 runs. Like, it was a really odd. He had a quality start here and there. He had 6 scoreless innings against Cincinnati at home back in May. But for the most part, it was a rough season. Regular season, as rough as that was, the postseason, he was very good. Con and a pro on that. Another con, and something to think about, is this was the second Tommy John surgery for Walker Buehler. He got drafted by the Dodgers in the first round in 2015 out of Vanderbilt, and had Tommy John prior to, I believe it was prior to debuting in the minors with them. Like, he didn't make a pitch for them until I think he threw like 5 innings in 2016 at the very end of the year as like a kind of rehab thing, and didn't really start in the minors until 2017. Now, he went all the way up to the majors in that 1 year and was in the rotation in 2018, but he's had Tommy John now twice. He also had a flexor tendon repair with that second Tommy John surgery. So he's gone under the knife twice. It's a small sample size of guys who have done that. We're waiting to see what Spencer Strider looks like. But that is riskier, that guys just don't come back the same after that Tommy John. You saw his regular season results where he struggled. Also, I can't find anything that confirms that he got the internal brace as part of that Tommy John surgery. For those of you who don't know, and to really simplify this, and I'm going to simplify it. They sent me, I wrote a story about them once, about the internal brace, and the company who makes that sent me these videos and an invitation to their facility and all that. But to simplify the internal brace, they put an artificial stitching type of reinforcement, I'm going to call it nylon tape, on both sides of the elbow that is designed to help take some of the force off of the UCL. It connects on both parts of the both ends of the elbow, and the idea is it stays in there permanently. And if you have unnatural or too much force on the UCL, it can take some of that force to keep the UCL from tearing, hopefully. I cannot find where he had that internal brace put in. I'm guessing because of the flexor tendon repair, they couldn't also do that. I don't know. But either way, he didn't necessarily have that. I don't really have a con on this one. Maybe he won't need it again. I don't have a con to offset he had a second Tommy John surgery. There's really not a lot, especially if there's no internal brace. There's no really upside to having a second one. You can't assume he's not going to need a third one, right? Johnny Venters exists. Like, he had to have a third one. Drew Rasmussen had the internal brace in lieu of having a third one, right? Pros and cons, more is he's probably not signing an extension, okay? He does fit the profile of a guy that would sign with Atlanta, right? He's from Kentucky. He went to Vanderbilt. But this is something, when he was healthy, he showed the ability to be a number 1 pitcher in baseball. Again, he had 2 top 10 Cy Young finishes in 4 seasons. He led baseball in starts in 2021. He's pitched multiple complete games. He's had shutouts on his ledger. He is not going to be signing a long-term extension, more than likely, unless you pay him like he is expected to be a number 1 pitcher. So this is a short-term deal. I am going to argue that this being a short-term deal is a pro in this case, because you have the security of knowing that if for some reason he cannot make it back to pre-surgery form, he's gone after this year, right? Maybe Atlanta would try to put a club option on this. They like to do club options. They would not do a player option. Maybe they try to put a club option on this. But either way, odds are Walker Buehler would be walking in free agency at the end of this one season of the deal. I'm going to argue that's a pro because you have the safety of if this doesn't work out, you're not committed to him long term. Obviously, some people will see this as a con. That is a downside also of if he's really good, he walks in free agency. He has not received a qualifying offer. Worst case scenario, you can qualify and offer him. You have an opportunity to re-sign him. Maybe he does decide he loves it in Atlanta and wants to sign an extension. Who knows? But I'm going to argue the short-term deal is a pro. Another pro here, and I mentioned it at the top, I think he's the only guy on the market that gives you the ceiling of a number one starter without you having to lock in long-term on a player, on a pitcher, and go 5 or something years. I think he's the only guy. Jack Flaherty is a very good pitcher. I think he's probably a number 2. Yes, he started game 1 of the World Series. I think that was just the timing thing. I think he's a number 2. Either way, you're not going to sign him to a 1 or 2 year deal. You're going to sign him long-term. Corbin Burns, long-term. Max Fried, long-term. All those guys are going to be long-term deals. I don't think Blake Snell's signing short-term again. He's going to want long-term. Walker Buehler's the only guy where you get a test drive without having to commit long-term to him. And I do think there is value in being able to get him on a shorter deal so that you have an out if it doesn't work out on the field. Now, the downside to this is I think a lot of people are underestimating what Walker Buehler was going to get. Spot Track, which is usually pretty decent with this stuff, they have his average annual salary, his calculated market value, at $3.9 million. And I absolutely do not expect that to happen. He made $8 million the last 2 seasons in lieu of arbitration. He settled with the team for $8 million. Their comps in here are other players who were coming off of injury, but are not in the same tier as him. Spencer Turnbull's deal, JT Brubaker's deal, Tyler Beatty, Colin Rea. Those are not the players that Walker Buehler is going to be compared to in free agency. I would be shocked if Walker Buehler makes less than Charlie Morton. I expect Walker Buehler to make $10 or $15 million. Am I willing to pay Walker Buehler $10 million for 2025? I'd do it. There is a dollar amount, though, where I would be hesitant to do it. And I don't know what that's going to be. Is it going to be 15? Is it going to be 20? I haven't seen the medicals. I haven't dug enough into the details of what he does to say yes or no on that. But there is going to be a point where some of these teams are going to be hesitant to do this to Walker Buehler. Now, I made the argument earlier that you need to sign 2 starters, or you need to acquire 2 starters this offseason. And after the break, I'll tell you why. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby talking about the Braves' reported interest in Walker Buehler and why you need to acquire 2 starters. We all know the reports that Spencer Strider will not be available for opening day, according to Alex Anthopoulos. I do also want to remind everybody of what we just talked about with Walker Buehler, that even if Spencer Strider is ready for opening day, there's no guarantee, or is ready soon after opening day, there's no guarantees that he will pitch like the Spencer Strider that we know, the Cy Young finalist, lead baseball in strikeouts, Spencer Strider. To me, that is one of the biggest unknowns about this rotation in 2025. And we're going to do a show later this week about the best and worst case scenarios for the rotation in 2025 and what Atlanta does. But outside of Spencer Strider, you still have to know how much Atlanta's losing from this rotation, okay? Assuming that Max Fried is gone. Assuming Charlie Morton doesn't come back. Because right now they're both free agents. We don't know. Atlanta is losing 59 starts and is losing 339 and 2/3 innings from those 2 guys. Atlanta starters last year pitched 904 and a third innings. So you are losing 37.5% of all of your rotation innings from Charlie Morton and Max Fried being gone. Okay? Now, yes, you have Chris Sale. Yes, you have Ronaldo Lopez. Yes, you have Spencer Schwellenbach. Do I think it's realistic to expect more than 135 and 2/3 innings out of Lopez? I do. He's had another year to acclimate to the rotation. He should be able to increase his workload. Do I think it's realistic to expect more than 123 and 2/3 out of Spencer Schwellenbach? I do. He pitched some of those innings in the minors last year, and he's not going to do that this year. Is it realistic that they both break 150? It is. Is it possible they get up into the 177 range where Chris Sale was? It is. And again, later this week, we'll talk about the best and worst case for the rotation and what that might look like. But 339 innings is unrealistic. Depending on who it is, it might be unrealistic to expect out of two starters. Because if you do the math here, that breaks down to 170 apiece. Atlanta only had two starters hit 170 last year. Max Fried had 174 and a third. Again, Chris Sale had 177 and 2/3. You look at the year before and you look at the innings, Strider had 186 and 2/3. Bryce Elder had 174 and 2/3. And we know how gassed he was at the end of the season. His performance was terrible after the All-Star break. 2022, Max Fried and Kyle Wright, 185 and a third and 180 and a third. Kyle Wright has barely pitched in two seasons since then, and I believe is going to make the 2025 Royals rotation, I think. But even then, workload concerns. You need at least two starting pitchers in your rotation. Some people would argue three. I don't think you need to go get three starters, but you're going to need multiple starters. And the way that I see Atlanta trying to do this, I don't think they're going to sign two in free agency, right? It feels like you might sign one, you might trade one, and I've split them into two buckets, okay? To me, Atlanta's probably going to look for a guy that can be in the middle of your rotation. He would slot in behind that trio of Sale, Lopez, and Schwellenbach. But he's a guy that you would feel comfortable with starting a postseason game. So I'm going to call him middle of the rotation, even though he would be the de facto four to start the season. Because to me, anybody in your top three, you're comfortable with starting a postseason game. And Walker Buehler would be in that group. Yes, he would be in that start a postseason game in 2025 group. Max Fried, obviously, if he comes back, he's in that group as well, right? He's in that start a postseason game group. But there's other options. If they trade for Jordan Montgomery, a lot of people believe he would be on your postseason starts list, right? He has good results in the postseason. Obviously, last year was a wash. Before that, he's looked good in the postseason. He'd be on your postseason starting list. Shane Bieber, as a free agent, recovering from Tommy John, probably won't be available until the second half of the year. I don't know how much Atlanta's going to have the runway, and two, the inclination to sign a guy that won't be available until the second half when you're already facing an unknown timeline for Spencer Strider. And you saw how hard it was for Ian Anderson to come back and have a chance at the major league level. They had guys going, and they didn't have the lead in the division or the wild card or anything to let him figure it out at the major league level, and he never came up. I think some of that may have been option driven and stuff as well, but still. Nathan Eovaldi as a free agent. I think he would be in that potential start a postseason game. If they trade for Garrett Crochet, we know Garrett Crochet would be in the list to start a postseason game. Yusei Kikuchi as a free agent would also be in that postseason list, provided he looked like the Houston Yusei Kikuchi and not the Toronto Yusei Kikuchi. Sonny Gray, if you trade for Sonny Gray, he's probably that guy that you would use for a game 3 kind of guy. Like, he's in that list as well. There's obviously more that I forgot. These are the ones that people have either talked about, asked about, or make a lot of sense based on what Atlanta likes to do. Going out and acquiring a guy who struggled somewhere else, like a Montgomery, buying low on somebody. A lot of these guys make sense, right? It's not an exhaustive list. There's more than that. And then the flip side of this is the second pitcher you bring in is probably going to be somebody for the back of your rotation, right? Probably going to be somebody who can eat innings, can be a veteran, can help mentor some of these young pitchers and things like that. I do think you'll see some prospects up for different stuff like a Drew Hackenberg and everything. And we've heard Spencer Schwellenbach talk about how much he learned from Chris Sale and Max Fried and Charlie Morton. And having some more veterans in that rotation and in that clubhouse always helps with your young pitchers. Maybe that's Griffin Morton. Maybe that's Charlie Morton coming back. Maybe they're planning on that back-end guy being Griffin Canning, who they already have. Again, we don't know if they're going to tender him a contract or not. That deadline's coming up soon. We'll definitely do a show that previews that as we get there. But there's other options for guys. It's hard to identify trades on this one, right? Nobody had Griffin Canning on Atlanta's radar prior to them trading for him, right? Just nobody saw that coming. So it's hard for me to pick a bunch of names and say these are the guys Atlanta might trade for. But you look at free agents, there's a couple different buckets that you could see. If Atlanta wanted to go for a guy that they can stick in the back of the rotation and could take innings, Andrew Heaney is a guy to me that could absolutely work in the back end of a rotation. He's probably not one of your first choices for a postseason game, but he's had flashes where he was on a good team and he looked really good, right? He was with LA in 2022, 4-4 across 16 appearances, 14 starts, ERA of 3, just over 3.10, right? Struck out 13.6 per 9 innings. To convert that to some people's preferred percentages, 35.5% strikeout rate, by far the highest of his career, but it was 72 2/3 innings. So obviously he did something that worked over there in LA. You sign him as a 4 or 5 and you hope that he can improve to maybe where he's a 3 or something. Think about Bryce Elder in 2023, how in the first half he looked a lot better than a number 5, right? It was the back half of the season where he really struggled and ended up not being very reliable down the stretch. But in the first half, he looked like a back-end guy who was significantly better than that, right? That's who Andrew Heaney might be. Or Michael Lorenzen, Spencer Turnbull. Those are guys who have spent time in the bullpen, who also can start so they can flex back and forth. You're going to need a long man with Jesse Chavez being gone. Grant Holmes may be that long man and a spot starter. He may be in the rotation to start the year. Who knows? So Michael Lorenzen and Spencer Turnbull could be those guys as well. Or maybe it's legitimately the true definition of a veteran. It is an older guy who's in his upper 30s, who is there to just, hey, whatever you can give us every 5th day is great. Just go out there, throw 5 innings. That's all we need. It could be like an Alex Cobb. It could be a Patrick Corbin. Maybe it's a Justin Verlander or a Max Scherzer. I'm not advocating for any of those guys. I'm saying that's a possible profile. We've seen they signed Charlie Morton in his upper 30s. They traded for Chris Sale in his upper 30s. They tried the desiccated corpse of Cole Hamels for a while. I think he made like $1 million a start or something because he started 2 games or whatever. But that's the kind of signing that you may see. It feels like you're going to see 2 starters. And the question's just going to be, can you get 2 guys that can be mid-rotation guys? Or do you have to get 1 mid-rotation guy and 1 back-end inning-eating kind of guy who is probably in the pen when the postseason gets here, if he's on the postseason roster at all, right? That's where you are right now. And how much you have to pay for that first guy in that first group dictates what kind of guy you can get for that second guy. Let's say you trade for Jordan Montgomery and Arizona's paying for a lot of his salary. Maybe that means you can afford a second mid-rotation guy like Nathan Eovaldi or a Yusei Kikuchi on a couple years or a Sonny Gray or something like that. And they average out to $20 million a year each. Who knows? Either way, this has been Braves Today for Monday, November 18th. If you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review with some kind words. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Also leave us a 5-star review with some kind words. I love those. And then either way, tell all your friends that they can go out and get all of their Braves news and notes from this podcast. And until next time, this has been Braves Today.